impact does come down to appropriate legislation and funding. And it's important for all of us to understand that. Let me turn to back to Senator Rubio, because the current debate now, again, let's make this really current and useful. As a representative, this is one big issue, but the central organizing issue that you'll be hearing about in the presidential election, who the next president is, a new Congress coming in, is the debt, is the deficit. Is the fact as a percent of GDP, we are under fiscal restraints that never, only really one time, but never in recent history have we been. How are we going to work our way through that? What do you tell people? We got the number one issue is jobs, debt, deficit, and yet we have an issue now that we know is affecting millions and millions and millions of people around the world that we need to continue to give voice to.
What does that have to do with
Let's let him answer the question. Please let him answer the question. Again, we're going to run out of time, and we've cut Barbara Lee short by 20 minutes. Please go ahead.
The issue of whether the U.S. should be...
Please be quiet, please. Just let him answer the question.
The issue of whether the United States should be spending money on AIDS policy and global health in light of this debt is something that comes up quite often. And the first answer is it's not the reason why we have a debt. We don't have a debt because of foreign aid, although a lot of using some of this public polling. Some of the public polling indicates that the majority of American people in these polls anyway, think the U.S. spends 20 or 25% of its money on foreign aid. It's like less than 1%. So it's not the reason why we have the debt. In fact, if you zeroed out foreign aid, it would do nothing for the debt, but it would be devastating, not just for the world, but for America's role in it. The second thing I would say is that the issue speaks to the core of who we are as a people. And I think one of the things that I'm proudest of this nation is its legacy of compassion, its willingness to be compassionate, and of its people to be compassionate. Because at the end of the day, this is the taxpayers' money, not mine. It's the taxpayers' money. And I think the willingness of the American people to fund a program like this in a bipartisan way, I think is a testament to our legacy as a nation of compassion. It's also a challenge to continue that legacy. The last thing I would say, in the most pragmatic way possible, separate from the human element of this, which can never be overstated, is I think it's in the national interest of the United States. I think it's in the national interest of the United States to help eradicate AIDS. For just on the African continent, the idea that millions of people will survive and live productive lives means they can be our partners in trade, they can be our partner in culture, they can be our partner in all sorts of endeavors, because prosperity around the world has always been prosperity here in our country. Of all the countries in the world, none is more global than ours. Our economy, our society is so much a reflection of the world and the cultures of the world that come here to do business or come here to visit or come here to interact with us. And so as much as any nation on the earth, America is not immune to things that are happening around the planet, and that includes disease, and that includes, of course, AIDS.
How receptive are our constituents? And I mean, the reality is that everybody here has been elected to office. Is that message coming through, do you think, as you
Well, I think AIDS and foreign aid are in some ways people can separate the two topics, because I think people understand this is about caring for folks that are going to die unless something is done. And that the only nation on earth that has the resources to put the kind of money that has been put into this program at the levels we funded it at is us. And so I think that I've never had anyone say they're not going to support me because of it. I don't think that's the challenge. I don't think convincing people that this is a good idea is as big a challenge as convincing people that we should keep doing it. There's two separate issues. One thing is to be opposed to it. I don't think you're going to find people that are opposed to it. The other issue is to get people excited about the opportunity before us. That's really the challenge. Excited about the idea that those of us like me who grew up in a generation where AIDS was a death sentence, can literally live in a world where there may not be anyone on the earth with it. That we will live to see that is something we should be excited about as an opportunity.
I think it's a perfect transition. I want to turn to Senator Coons, because we got to start looking ahead. We can't really keep the exact same message as we've had in the past. And if there's one thing this conference in the United States is doing this weekend, it's the celebration of the past. But how do we articulate and bring and use what we have learned from the very positive past investment as we look ahead? What's it going to take to sustain U.S. global leadership on issues like HIV?
It's a challenge, but it's something that we can do. Each of us knows people, friends, family, neighbors who we've lost to this terrible disease. And each of us knows people, family, friends, neighbors, coworkers who are living with this disease. And as we look forward, we do have a significant challenge. In the United States, as in so many other countries, our budget is under real pressure. And we've got two pathways forward. One is to cut spending and to restrict access to health care and to exclude and to deny and to find ways to reduce and reduce and reduce our investment. But I think the numbers show that both domestically in the United States for a path forward for Medicare and Medicaid and overseas in terms of our investment in health care, that's not a pathway that reflects our values or that is really ultimately successful. The better pathway, I think, is one where we double down, where we invest further in basic science, in translational medicine, in the development of vaccines and treatments, in improving the delivery of healthcare, both at home and abroad, that we broaden our focus of exactly who we're treating and how and who's part of the solution, and we innovate and cure our way out of this. That, I think, is in keeping with the optimism and the entrepreneurship of the American character, and that's a way for us to keep faith with the leadership that you showed at the very foundation of this PEPFAR initiative. I think the great thing about this conference is it's an opportunity for you to challenge us yet again to be global leaders in partnership with the nations that are our partners in this struggle. We've seen some real challenges and some real changes. As Secretary Clinton said, I believe earlier this week, we're at a point where we have to make PEPFAR more sustainable, and that means being more accountable and more transparent, and our being able to say to the people we represent, the American dollars that are being invested wisely and well. We need to be able to say that our partners around the world are partners in the burden, in the challenge of treating and curing this disease, and that has dramatically changed. In 2011, for the first time, domestic spending by nations overseas on the AIDS healthcare costs exceeded donor contributions. We have more than 40 countries that are carrying 3/4 of the cost of the ongoing domestic support, and that's in part because their economies are growing. And then last, we have to be strategic, as I suggested, investing in game-changing research, investing in delivering and developing vaccines, and investing in innovations in healthcare delivery will not just beat this disease, will not just cure people of HIV/AIDS, will not just end the AIDS pandemic, but will lay the foundation for tackling a whole family of diseases and problems and challenges that face the whole globe. I think that is the optimistic path forward, and the one that actually in the end is most true to the American character and spirit, and the most likely for us to be able to sustain in a bipartisan way in the Congress.
Thank you very much. That whole concept of capturing the innovation as we go forward. Mike, I've represented Tennessee, 6 or 7 million Tennesseans for 12 years, and I'm kind of glad to be out of the business, to be honest. But you represent Wyoming. How do you justify, with the deficit, the debt, the jobs, our political elections are coming up, all of the other very real challenges that we have? What do you say? And how do you view the future as you make this transition?
Because
Hang on a second. Go ahead, Mike.
Because you involved me in this, it was not a big problem in Wyoming. There was a problem, but not the kind you have to be involved in every day. But I've been involved in it on a daily basis since I got involved with this and realized what the problem is in the United States as well as overseas. But what happens over there affects us over here. And the people of Wyoming are beginning to recognize that. They're also seeing for the first time some appreciation from other countries for what the United States is doing. This is one of the first efforts that's ever actually gotten down to the people. Most of our effort gets stopped at the government level, and the people never know about it. If you ask people from Africa what the United States has done, probably the one thing that they will mention is help with AIDS. And without that help, they'd be in a real fix. The most effective thing that all of you can do is share your stories. Share your stories. Do as the Africans have been doing. Share some appreciation for what's been done and help us to know what would make the future better. As I mentioned, we're going to be reauthorizing the Ryan White as well as PEPFAR, and your stories will help us to sell that not only in DC but back in our home states. And the home states are important at the same time.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, what about the future? You've come to Washington, D.C. It's a more partisan town than it was when 2003, 2004, and it's time Ryan White was initially passed. How do you see this playing out in terms of framing it, and how do you see the future going forward, both helping us frame the debate, but as you will?
Well, I think my immediate concern, as I've already touched upon earlier, is that somehow success leads to complacency. I think what I worry about the most is that even here domestically now, we've seen the focus on this kind of shift away to other diseases and other problems because this perception's been created that, well, if you have, there's no issue here to deal with. The fact of the matter is there are some ongoing issues. There's concern about resistance to the medications. There's concerns about the cost of the affordability of being able to provide this. The costs are still significant, particularly in the developed world. And so my hope is that what we'll see is continued investment and a heightened sense of, I think the closer we get to the finish line is not the time to ease up. It's the time to run through the tape, as they say in track and field parlance. You want to run through the finish, and that means increased investment in innovation. You want better treatments that are more cost effective and easier to deliver, and that takes an investment of time, energy, money, and resources. You want your best and brightest researchers around the world to be focused on HIV/AIDS, and so that we can finish the job of solving this problem, whatever that solution is ultimately going to be. And I just hope we don't lose that sense of urgency about it, that somehow it's not diverted to many other worthy causes around the world, but this one is at the precipice of real dynamic changing developments, but we've got to keep the focus on it because of the investment and the energy is lost behind it, then we're kind of getting stuck, the progress stops happening, and then it takes years to restart it again.
The bipartisanship, I don't want to overstress, but it was a part of the history, and over the last, again, those of you from other countries, sort of got a bimodal distribution, and the bimodal ends up getting further and further apart. And I'll open up to the whole panel here. Just how do we forge it's a nonpartisan issue, how do we fashion bipartisanship within the committees that all of you work on? These are the leaders today on these issues. How do you lead where you're not talking just, you got both parties represented, where you're not just talking to your party and your base, or you go to the cable TVs where it forces you out? How do we make this, how do we keep this a bipartisan issue practically in these strange institutions of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives?
Senator, I do think a critical part of it is travel, is visiting HIV/AIDS clinics and healthcare centers here in the United States and overseas. As I mentioned earlier, I spent time in Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania in 1984, 1987. I just returned about 6 weeks ago with a delegation from the House and Senate. I went to Tasso Mulango Clinic in Kampala. I went to Buguri Clinic in Dar es Salaam, and was really impressed with the caliber of the service that they're delivering, about how CDC and PEPFAR have integrated services, about how they're training local healthcare workers, and how effectively they're delivering care. There's lessons in that, both for how we deliver care here and for how much of a distance there is to go. And I have to be able to stand in front of the people of Delaware and explain the ongoing significant investment we're making to sustain American leadership. There was one story that stuck with me about malaria. I was very encouraged to hear in Tanzania, an island of about 1 million people off of the mainland of Tanzania, that we have nearly completely eradicated malaria through bed nets and through fogging and through a variety of interventions. And the president of Zanzibar said to me, yes, just as we did back in 1967. And I said, excuse me? And he said, the United States came in, and in partnership with some community groups, we eradicated malaria back in 1967. I said, well, but didn't you just say that there was a 60% prevalence rate just 5 years ago? Yes, we weren't able to sustain a malaria-free Zanzibar. And so to the point Senator Rubio just made, sustaining this is going to take this kind of continual travel, exposure, and reinforcement on a bipartisan basis that challenges us to not just develop and invent, deliver treatments and cures, but also to be engaged around the world in ways that make that effective. This is going to be a long, long struggle. It'll be a long fight. And it's one that we're committed to being in for the long haul, but we need you to be committed to being in it with us.
I think this whole idea of engagement, U.S. leadership, I want to ask both of y'all about bipartisanship, because I just think it's real as we play out. But if you look at what the United States does in terms of leadership, you know, I talked to the director of the CDC yesterday, and basically, I didn't know this, but our CDC in the United States is responsible for about 50 to 60% of the I better stop.
Tired of stories. I want real strategy. Story. When I'm from Africa, let me speak for myself.
Let me continue with on the bipartisanship.
Strategy, that story. We would like to speak. Let us speak, please.
Hang on just a second. I'll come to you. Let me have them finish their questions, and then I'll come to you and give you 30 seconds. Mike, on the bipartisanship.
Let's hear the question.
Let me turn it to both of you. What can we do? You mentioned travel. Is there anything else that we can do as we go forward to make sure that this stays a bipartisan issue?
I think that the thing we have to make sure is that this issue never becomes partisan, that we don't allow it to become a Republican or a Democratic issue, that we don't let it become a liberal versus conservative issue, that we keep it a bipartisan issue, the way we talk about it, the way we engage on it. So that's what I hope we continue.
Everybody.
Save lives if you allow us to start. Will you listen?
How long? Can you take 1 minute? Huh? Okay. Why don't you take 1 minute? Let me go ahead. Why don't you take 1 minute?
When you guys create
turn this microphone on.
Sir.
Turn this microphone on.
He'll turn the mic up. Just hang on a second so we can hear him speak. Just so we can hear him. Just sit down. So we can hear him speak. Just sit down for a second. I want to hear him speak. And please take a minute.
Listen, I have something to tell you.
Yes.
What we have to do is to stop saying we need to, and move the we have to, we must, and we will.
Do what?
We will reform the age just once because 10 million people in my continent are still waiting.
Where are you from?
I'm a Gambian.
Yeah.
I used to live in South Africa, spend time in Kenya. I know everywhere in Africa, I know the stories, and I live in HIV. So you have to listen to me to tell you the story.
Let's hear you, but
let me tell you what I'm going to say. Will you listen? You created a system that continues to kill us. My HIV is angry and I'm pissed off. Because you're watching people die when you can stop them from dying. You're watching babies be infected animals when in your country people can survive AIDS when others in Africa can't survive the disease. Are you trying to tell me because we are born in a poorer continent, we have to die? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Is that what you're really trying to tell me? Will you give me the excuse that black people in the Bronx who don't have jobs will not get HIV medications because they don't have jobs and their insurance scheme can't support them? My question is, the global fund is out of money. Don't give me the excuse of financial restraints. We want to save lives and we want you to act fast. It's about the lives of people like me around the world. It's about 10 million people who need drugs. It's about the millions of people who you've given your award years ago and told them you would survive because we put money into the global fund, we put money into the PEPFAR, we will not criminalize people, we make sure babies don't get HIV, we make sure that every woman is protected, that every person that sells sex is safe, that people that are on medications get the very best of them. And here you are, telling me stories about people in my country, telling me stories about people that I know.
Thank you.
We are pissed off, and we can't wait to listen what you will do.
Listen, I appreciate it. It's 2 o'clock now, but I appreciate everybody coming today. I know the schedule dictates that we bring our discussion to a close. We've made tremendous progress that is time to both talk about and to celebrate, and I very much appreciate the leadership of the 4 representatives before you today. their thoughtfulness, their commitment, their boldness, and I ask the audience to give these 4 individuals and the United States leadership a round of applause. Thank you all for being with us, and thank you for all that you do providing HIV/AIDS around America and around the world. Thank you.